Okay. Are we ready? All set? Okay.
Ready, set, go.
Ready, set, go. Okay. We'll call to order the Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners study session for Wednesday, October 25th, 2017. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Bonnie.
Gore Follett. Here. Johnson.
Here.
Lathrop.
Yep.
Mayor.
Here.
Wheelock.
Yes, ma'am.
Crawford.
Here.
And Commissioner Klaus is excused tonight.
This is our first chance for public comment. Bonnie, would you read the rules, please?
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners which is required to be open to the public under the provision of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions, if any. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. The chairperson may, at his or her discretion, extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak. Public comment will be solicited during the 2 public comment periods noted in Rule 5.4 Order of Business. However, public comment will generally be received at any time during the meeting regarding a specific topic currently under discussion by the board. Members of the public wishing to comment should raise their hand or pass a note to the clerk in order to be recognized, and shall not address the board until called upon by the chairperson.
Thank you. Do we have anybody for first public comment? Anyone? Oh, Ms. Erickson.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Chris Erickson, Director of Grand Traverse County Parks and Recreation. And I just would like to remind the public and our county residents that we are working on our master plan in County Parks and Recreation right now. And tomorrow we have 3 community input sessions going on here at the Governmental Center, here on the 2nd floor around the corner in the training room. If you wish to stop by, we'd love to have you give us suggestions and ideas about our county parks. Talk to us about how our county parks are funded and how they're run. The input sessions are absolutely necessary for us to file our master plan with the MDNR so that we qualify for grants for park projects and improvements next year. We also have a survey online. You can go to our webpage, grandtraverse.org/parks. That survey does not take the place of this community input effort. So I encourage all of you to get involved and reach out and talk to us about our parks. We only get to do this every 5 years, where it will really make a difference and be a foundation for our future parks work. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Step right up.
I'm Tom Busamra, 13482 South High Point Drive, Traverse City, Michigan. Before I begin my comments, did everyone get one of these brochures? I know they were passed out. Anyone need them? Okay.
I don't have one.
I want to reference this.
I don't have one.
I'll take one.
I need one. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I did get it. Sorry.
Thank you.
I have two.
I wanted to make sure you had that so that I will reference it. Before, during, and after incarceration is we hope to be a nonprofit, but a grassroots network that is meant to address some of the concerns that many people in our community have over our jail, our marginalized population in the jail, and the recidivism rate, and bringing them back into the community in a productive fashion. Let me also say that I have been the Catholic chaplaincy presence at the jail for the past 31 years. So I have observed a few things in that time. I go on Sunday mornings, the worship service the inmates can attend is what we provide, and also get back for Christian counseling. What I have observed with budget cuts recently is real dearth of programs being provided. We had a Bible study that was eliminated, 6 or 7 people that we had to tell them that they could no longer be involved. We had GED that was eliminated, Project Unity for Life eliminated, a couple other programs from the Protestant chaplaincy that were eliminated. At the same time that clergy visiting hours were eliminated. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday were opportunities for pastors to come in to visit members of the community. So I have, in the last few years, seen this real hardship in terms of the needs going unmet in the Grand Traverse County Jail. I want to really address one in particular. You know, that some estimates say that 2/3 of inmates are have mental health issues, and that with cross-diagnosis of drug abuse, we have a real need for that kind of attention and service. I wonder if you are aware that psychiatric services at this point to the jail, 2 hours for 150, 60, sometimes 70 people, 2 hours a week for that total population. We are working with community mental health. We want to see what we can do to better prioritize mental health services in the jail. And at the same time, we understand that one person from community mental health is there once a week. The problem is...
You can finish your point, but we need to wrap it up.
Problem is that the access the access of inmates or the recognition that they have a need is where the problem lies. You know, if there's a need that an inmate has, they fill out a kite, which is a little piece of paper that they stick on the jail bars, and then they may hear an answer to that in a day or two. Well, you know, who is going to say, I'm having a psychotic episode, I'm hyperventilating, I'm having an anxiety attack, please could you respond to me in the next day or two? You know, it's the access. Our deputies do a wonderful job with safety and protocols for safety, but they are not trained as social workers and mental health workers. So I really hope that you take a look at the budget for the county jail and to bring back some of these services. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you. Yes, you can.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
What sort of funding do you need in order to provide Bible study in the jail?
None, and I am not speaking of Bible study. I'm talking about mental health.
Oh, okay. You referenced Bible study and some...
I'm just saying those were one of the things that were cut, along with GED, along with Project Unity for Life, some of the programs that help stabilize people. If you notice in the brochure, we have a screening and release program, which is currently on hold because of the shortage of staff.
Okay. So
Okay.
just I really just wondered if you had a number in mind. If you're coming here asking us to look at the budget, what's the number?
The number, reinstatement of the cuts that have been recently made.
What's the number?
Well, I will do some research and give you a number about,
Okay.
in terms of what we think would help fit the bill.
That would be helpful.
All right,
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Yes, Mr. Largent.
Steve Largent, 5445 Sharman Road. I'm sorry I'm battling a cold right now, but yesterday's and the last couple days' storm events have really, I hope, shown the need that we need to provide the drain service to help the residents and the business owners. I was at the old Mike Steinmeck's old Granger building he owns there, where the Milliken Millwork is out of, in the Grand Traverse Mall. And that building was flooded yesterday. Their van was halfway up in the doors to the windshield. The product inside, a lot of it was on the ground, getting damaged, and it was just really unfortunate to see, and it doesn't have to happen. I spent the entire day yesterday back and forth behind there in the swamp and looking where all that water was coming from, the sources of that water. And I think, what I saw, even though it was a, unfortunate event, really opened and gave us some insight as to what needs to be done. I was able to get a hold of the engineer Spicer Group and get them out there to see it themselves. And so really, even though that event, like I said, was unfortunate, I think it shed a lot of light on what's going on out there. And also, we're going to be able to potentially save those residents or those businesses tens of thousands of dollars when it comes to fixing what's going on there at the Cass Road Drain. But that's only one of the drains that this was going on. I was not able to get out to the other 12. When I came into the office this evening, just before this meeting, the phone was blinking off the hook there, and besides a bunch of phone calls yesterday, had another 10 messages today, people with water in the basement, and it's a real issue, it's a real need, and I just, though these kind of events are going to continue to happen more often as we've seen 2 5-inch rain events this summer. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, ma'am. Would you like to?
Can I beg, can I plead, can I
You can
Make
have 3
dinner
minutes
for
to
ya.
talk.
State your name, please.
Deb Zarafa, Bates Road, Williamsburg, Michigan, Animal Control Officer for Grand Traverse County. In the last week, I got 7 dogs in 4 days. 4 needed emergency medical care, so they went to the vet, so we won't go into that. Today, I dealt with a dog bite, pretty serious issue with aggressive dogs. Dealt with the police officers last Friday on site with both people carrying concealed weapons. One was going to shoot the dog, the other one was going to shoot the guy. We have serious issues here in Grand Traverse. This is a daily occurrence for me. Picked up a stray dog today that was aggressive with a catch pole. Nobody else to get near the dog, so there's a risk factor there always with bites. Again, I can't reiterate enough that we need to get under the Sheriff's Department for lots of reasons, liability probably being number 1. Number 2, because we need to protect the officers ourselves from aggressive, vicious dogs. They're on the rise. I want to protect our citizens from those kind of things. One of my spiels is 50% of our population that doesn't even have dogs need animal control even more than the dog owners. So I'm just going to plead with you. I know it's not mandated. We have to fund it. We have to do something because I think we're at risk if we don't do that.
Thank you. Anybody else? We'll have another chance at the end. That's all for now? Okay. We will move on to our budget presentation. Who's up first?
I will.
You will, okay.
Madam Chair and Board of Commissioners, over the past 7 weeks, we've kind of been focusing the majority of our time on trying to develop the 2018 recommended budget. Through a lot of meetings with all of the department heads and a lot of collaboration, we've been able to make the reductions where we needed to and are able to present a recommended 2018 budget that is currently balanced. Unfortunately, it doesn't take into account things like salary increases for those individuals that may not have had a salary increase for 1, 2, or 3 years. And that's something I'm very disappointed in, and am going to actively be seeking funding to try to address those employees. We intend to just go through a high-level PowerPoint presentation with charts and graphs that will give you a high-level perspective of it. You all have the line item detail, or close to line item detail for the rest of it that we're hoping we'll be able to let everyone go back and kind of digest, develop their questions. You can funnel questions back through here. We'll consolidate answers and distribute them to all the commissioners in hopes of being able to meet potentially before our next board meeting on November 1st for a study session at 4 p.m. But Jody will take us through the PowerPoint presentation and the overview, and then we can determine next steps from there.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. The board and for the excellent turnout tonight.
Can you pull your microphone forward? Thank you.
Thank you.
Much better.
All right. So as Vicki has stated, this is meant to be a high-level overview of the 2018 recommended budget and the process and methodology that we went through in its preparation. The board budget workbooks that you've been provided are for those funds, the line item detail has been provided for those funds that have a general fund impact. For those that are self-sustaining special revenue funds that don't require general fund support, they have been included in the summary, which is in the first section or first tab of the workbook. For the audience, for the public, for employees, that's part of the agenda packet, so it is available publicly online, that full summary. If those are funds that you would like to explore in line item detail or greater detail at a later date, please by all means let us know and we will provide additional information. The budget process itself is ongoing from one year to the next. It really never seems to end, nor should it. It starts each year with the departmental call for budget requests. This year, all of the prior budget request forms for personnel items, facilities, IT were made electronic. Those went out first so that we could receive them back, and then between finance, HR, IT, and facilities administration review those requests, as then the departments continue to work on entering their line item requests into our computer system. The finance department held several budget training sessions before ultimately the departmental budgets were requested for submission for finance and administration's review. Upon Ms. Uffel joining us last month, we then scheduled departmental meetings to discuss the various requested budgets and continue to work on developing that balanced recommended budget. Any changes to the requested budgets were input into the AS400 with notes, and ongoing conversations were had with the departments regarding those changes as we sought to alleviate what was originally projected deficit. Finally, our work here brought us to present you with a balanced budget, and our next steps will be for the tentative proposed dates for special study sessions and public hearing and budget adoption by law before December 31st. Our proposed date is December 6th. That's the first meeting in December, which would allow for 3 to 4 meetings to review the budget. As with last year, there were some main objectives or budget standards for preparing the recommended budget. As always, we sought to be conservative in our revenue projections, such that we were projecting our revenues and then recommending expenditures within what we project to receive, as opposed to setting our expenditures, what we would like to spend, and projecting our revenues so that we could fund them. Ultimately, that would lead us down a very path. The second bullet point here is to fully fund the annual pension payment of 2018 will be our first year with the amortization extension moving us for 16 years and stabilizing our payment at $5.9 million. We also included contribution for OPEB funding. This will be the third year in a row. We sought to meet our contractual obligations for salary or wage increases. Those are the step increases for employees below step 6. And as Ms. Uffel has mentioned, we'll continue to seek funding for those above step 6. We continue to strive to invest in necessary infrastructure, both for facilities and IT, as always, to minimize the ultimate impact of services. That's why we're all here, to serve those residents of Grand Traverse County with high-quality services in the most cost-effective and efficient manner. Ultimately, when we refer to a balanced budget, what we mean is that there's no use of fund balance to fill the gap that we are projecting our operating revenues and operating expenditures such that those expenditures can be fully funded through what we expect to receive. Some of the major factors that impacted this year's budget preparation, again, annual increases in our healthcare costs. This is something that many businesses experience, both public and private. We have those wage increases of 4.5% for all employees below Step 6, that annual pension payment to MERS, retiree healthcare contribution, our other contractual and debt service obligations. These are all considered fixed costs that ultimately we would not be able to change without legal implications. And then finally, we've made it in a number of meetings or expressed the priority for investment in our facilities and IT. In moving towards the 2017 balanced budget, there were a number of one-time costs or one-time requests that we were not able to fund. However, we did review our projected 2017 activity, and we'll be proposing that a number of those items are brought forward from 2018 into 2017 and funded through those available resources. One of the things that's commonly mentioned by department heads is that they give back every year. I've heard it on a number of occasions, well, but I give back every year. So when we have an operating surplus at the end of the year, when we had projected, for instance, in this case, to have a balanced budget, there are a number of things that could have occurred. And that give back is either a matter of timing, if there were planned projects or expenditures that for some reason failed to occur by year end, but are still planned to occur, then nothing's really been given back. It's just been moved, and we would be asking for that appropriation to be moved into the subsequent year. With the instance of vacant positions, the county has historically had the policy of fully funding its projected personnel positions, regardless of whether they're filled or vacant. So when during the course of the year there are vacant positions, that just goes into unexpended budget. Those are one-time savings. If the position is not being eliminated, we then still have to anticipate that it will be filled and take that into consideration in the subsequent year's budget. And then finally, the only way to truly give back would be either to structurally reduce costs, either by seeking further efficiencies, reorganizations of departments, or increasing revenues in some way. As I mentioned, by reviewing for any of those events that may have occurred for 2017 and projecting our year-end surplus, this is a list of items that would be recommended to be moved forward for use in 2017 available resources. For instance, the jail has electronic upgrades and medical cell renovations that it has requested to complete, various patrol equipment and vehicles, ADA upgrades to the Hall of Justice. The Family Court had requests for electronic equipment and facilities projects, central dispatch mobile switch replacement, and then various IT infrastructure upgrades that will be necessary, one, for the sustainability of the organization, but also a number of other requests are contingent upon those upgrades being made. Personnel costs are the largest category of expenditures for the county, both in the general fund and across the other funds. So some of the drivers for the personnel costs in 2018, again, the step increases. We did remove new position requests that were initially submitted. All existing positions that did not receive funding in 2017 continue to remain unfunded. The vacant positions that existed at the time that we began the budget process were reviewed for potential to hold or defund. No cost of living adjustments are currently included. the 9.3% increase that we experienced in our healthcare is the board recently took action under Public Act 152 such that we did take into consideration that 80-20 split for all employees in 2018. And then I've noted here our life insurance costs have increased by 36% over the prior year. And while the dollar amount is relatively small, it's only approximately $20,000 increase from the prior year. 36% is rather large. The reason why I note that is because, like healthcare costs, this is a bargaining issue. And this is a benefit for which we're basically at the mercy of the life insurance company. When our benefits administrator went to market to try to bid our life insurance, no other carriers would provide a proposal or a response. Luckily, our current insurance carrier maintained coverage, but again, at a 36.3% increase. So this is something that we're looking at a holistic approach as we approach contract negotiations. So taking into consideration those fixed costs, those things that we could identify were new requests and then subsequently removed, we also looked at the operating line items of the various departments and looked to compare their 2018 request to 2016 actual or 2017 year-end projected. In the case where they were reduced to 2016 actual or 2017 year-end projection, we did use the larger of those two amounts. The 2017 year-end projection was calculated by taking the data that was available in our system, so all of the invoices that had been entered through the time of the budget preparation, and although the information provided is through September 30, that September 30 was the report run date, but there are, because we're in the middle of just an operating month, invoices that may be outstanding that we haven't even received yet. Therefore, we took the activity to date, divided it by 8, and multiplied it by 12. So even though it says 930, there's some cushion there that we anticipated to make sure that we weren't underfunding that projection. In the example here, the 2017 budget was simply increased by 3%. This is just purely an example, but just simply increased by 3% regardless of actual 2016 or year-end projection, in which case they seem to be at a lower rate of expenditure than in the prior year. So we would have set it to 825 as opposed to 750 or the request of 1030. Along with my notes. All right, so the all funds, again, these are the special revenue funds that the county is required by law to adopt budgets for. And only those are kind of called out, that those larger amounts for the revenue sources. Transfers in reflects the general fund support that other funds receive. So all of the $66 million, 16% of that is actually general fund supporting the operations of other funds or departments. I've just spoken at length about the use of fund balance and how a structurally balanced budget does not use fund balance. There are a number of other special revenue funds that have requested the use of fund balance. This can occur for a number of reasons. For instance, in the health department, I was speaking with Marissa about the Medicaid cost settlement and how that typically crosses fiscal years. So the projected revenues would be booked as a receivable and used in a subsequent year to support those costs. The front of the court has requested use of fund balance consistent with prior years and still in consideration to their fund balance policy which requires that they maintain 50%. The Parks Department, for instance, has a small amount of fund balance. There was a count in the County Special Projects Fund. There is an amount that has historically remained for a number of years, so they're requesting to utilize that for Twin Lakes, which was the designated purpose when those monies were raised. Again, this is all funds. They're recommended appropriations. So recommended appropriations being less than our projected revenues. General fund being the largest fund, various other funds. The tables that would support this pie chart are in that first tab. Again, after the transmittal, it's the first page, summary by funds. We wanted to see the numbers that correspond with this pie chart. Moving into the general fund, which again supports any number of the other funds, projected revenues are projected to exceed $38 million in 2018. Taxes remain the largest source of operating revenues. We've included a call-out table that shows the changes in sources of fund balance, so they show the sources of revenue based on the 2017 original budget. In a later slide, I'll get into why. But here it's meant to highlight, one, where various sources of revenues come from in the pie chart, the 64% through taxes, but two, the changes from 17 original budget to our 2018 projected revenues in our recommended budget. You'll see that taxes, there's a slight increase in the proportionate share of our total revenues. There are some decreases, for instance, in licenses and permits and charges for services. They have corresponding decreases in expenses. For instance, in license and permits, there's a decrease of approximately $190,000, actually exactly $190,000. And that's a result of soil erosion being moved from the general fund to the health department. So there's also a corresponding decrease in the expenditures for that department because they're no longer included in the general fund appropriations. And then a similar corresponding decrease in revenue and expenditures for the way that we report the Register of Deeds revenue for the automation fund. This is really just a method of accounting. As I had just noted, the reason why I used 2017 original budget for the prior table is because we had one-time event in 2017 that inflated the total revenues that would have otherwise been reported. So we had the use of fund balance and a transfer in from the delinquent tax revolving fund in order to make that one-time payment to MERS of $5.6 million. So whereas the original budget was $37 million, you'll see the amended budget at $42. Below that, I have removed that event so that it's more apples to apples because the decrease of 10% from 17 to 18 wouldn't give you a true picture, whereas the 2% would be more accurate. This, for those that are viewing or in the audience, is a table, again, right out of the agenda packet. So similar to the pie graph for general fund, this revenue by source bar graph is to illustrate trends. So this is basically the data on the just previous slide. I don't know how to go back. So basically this data displayed in a graph to just show the trend. So for instance, the orange is fiscal year 16 actual, or that very first column. You've got the light blue fiscal year 17 budget, dark blue fiscal year 17 year-end projected, then light green fiscal year 18 requested, and dark green fiscal year recommended. The categories, with the exception of property taxes, all illustrate relatively flat revenues from one year to the next, 16 even through 2018, you will see an upward trend in our property tax revenue, as we would expect, as property tax values in this area continue to increase. And then in that very first little set of blue columns, that's that one-time use of fund balance, and in the last set of blue columns, that one-time transfer, and that's the use of fund balance in the delinquent tax revolving fund. Otherwise, again, revenues remain fairly constant with the exception of increasing property tax revenues. While property tax revenues have been increasing, unfortunately, they continue to increase at a slower rate than the rest of our expenditures. The annual average change from 2008 to 2017 is 1.64%, slightly higher this past few years. You'll see that there was a lag in 2011 from the market crash in 2008. So it did take some time for those falling property values to hit the property tax bills. And those hit in 2011. Took approximately 6 years, based on this illustration, if you were to draw a line across, for us to return to our 2009 values. This is largely a result of state legislation. We have projected 2018 such that, as you can see, hopefully those orange and blue lines will intersect. That will mean that we were fairly accurate with our projections and the information that was utilized from County Treasurer's Office and equalization. Also of note, before I move on to the next slide, you'll notice with the exception of 2011, when those property tax values decreased and fully hit our tax revenue, we had a trend of, in 8 of 10 years, budgeting less than our actuals. So our actuals each year tended to exceed what we had projected, meaning we've been conservative for a number of years in our estimates. And our total expenditures, these pie graphs break out the expenditures by functional area. For instance, public safety, health and welfare, legislative, judicial, and general government, with the largest portion of general fund operating budget going to support public safety efforts. And next are transfers to other funds, for instance, Health Department, Child Care, Department of Human Services, Parks and Rec, Friend of the Court, County Facilities, our CIP, our Capital Improvement Projects Fund, Circuit Court, District Court, and Community Corrections. This is summarized in a table again in the budget packet by department, and it's broken out by functional area. Here are expenditures by category, so it's both useful to look at functional area, but then also what are we spending our money on? Not just for what purpose, but for what cost. And you'll see here that the largest portion or category of costs is for personnel. I have extracted our pension liability payments from this bar graph so that they could be shown separately. Personnel costs by themselves constitute 44% of the total general fund budget, and that's not taking into consideration the 25% that we transfer out to other funds and that would also support a similar percentage of personnel costs. Our unfunded pension liability payment by itself, so excluding normal cost, which is included with personnel costs, is 10% of our total general fund budget, with the others being commodities, contractual services, other charges. We've noted with the capital outlays, the significant decrease from what was requested, the little green bar, to what was funded is largely a result of our proposal to bring a number of expenditures forward and still meet that need. So similar to revenues exceeding initial projections, expenditures have historically not met with with our budgeted expenditures. So they've been below budget each year. So we've had higher than projected revenues and lower than projected expenditures, ultimately resulting in operating surpluses year after year, despite having projected balanced or, say net zero budgets at year end. So the average annual difference between what we had projected to spend and what we actually spent is $1.5 million. You'll see significant uptick for 2017 projected year end. Again, that's that $5.6 million payment and the additional $250,000 that was placed in an OPEB trust.
Sorry, what was that number? The OPEB number?
250,000? Did I say 250 million?
No.
No, I just didn't hear it.
I was like, whoa, holy cow. No. Then why didn't we pay off our pension debt? So a significant portion of that annual operating surplus, again, are those vacant funded positions. So every year we have, through just regular course of business turnover, the period of time that it takes to then fill that vacant position, budget savings from personnel. So a large portion, again, for our projected 2017 year end is due to those vacant positions. I placed an asterisk here as just a caveat that our projected year end doesn't take into consideration if vacant positions are filled in the fourth quarter. So ultimately that would reduce our projected year end surplus.
How many of those years were there hiring freezes?
I am not sure. I do not have that historical.
I mean, if we're using that number for a basis, I'm just curious, because I know there were some years where they had hiring freezes, so.
Sonny, do you know?
Not very many.
Okay.
Our historian, wasn't it?
Yes.
So finally, with this overview, all sorts of kind of broader information, in your budget workbook or even in the agenda packet, the summary information that is provided there is a transmittal from administration. As I mentioned, a summary by fund, which ties to an earlier pie chart, but that would give you the appropriations information by each special revenue fund, including the general fund. It's then split out by general fund revenues by source and general fund expenditures by department. Within those, that information, some of the columns that are important to note as you review across, the fiscal year 16 actual activity, the fiscal year 17 amended budget, the activity as of 9/30, because that's largely the basis for then the year-end projections and what we used for recommending various operating line items. The original 18 requests that were submitted by departments. We've provided any changes. So for instance, negative amount, you would be able to see which departments were impacted by any changes to their initial requests. The 18 recommended budget, which is balanced, and the differences between 18 recommended and the 17 budget. As noted earlier, the next steps will be for the board and the public to provide input. We have proposed tentative dates beginning with just 1 week from today in a special study session in advance of the regular meeting on November 1st, again on November 15th, and then if needed, a special study session on the 29th. It would have typically been the 27th of that Thanksgiving week. And then finally, the public hearing and adoption on December 6th. Any questions?
Yep, questions? Bob?
Well, the first thing I noticed is we had that veteran ad hoc committee.
I know,
we need
well,
to
we'll talk
reschedule.
about that at the end. Yep, we'll work on that. comments, questions? Sunny, you had some questions you were writing down.
Oh, I have lots.
Okay, go.
You know, I spent a couple hours with Vicki earlier about my little stick-it notes here. What I see primarily, a few things that I'm going to highlight. Our health insurance costs are significantly driven by what they call an experience rate. I'd really like to see some sort of real numbers about what that means and what it makes, because, you know, in my situation, I pay for health insurance for a number of employees, and, you know, experience rate usually doesn't become a discussion for me, but in my particular case, my employees tend to be possibly a little younger and, you know, single and do those kind of things. But when I see this thing that we have a high experience rate, is it because we're not educating our employees as to what it means when they go to the doctor and the doctor suggests, well, you know, we could do this test or we could do that test? All of those tests come with a price tag, and that price tag drives our healthcare numbers. So, you know, we need to talk about that a little bit somewhere along the way. Co-op extension, one of the things that we've talked about over the years back and forth is we currently fund a full-time 4-H coordinator. That was a commitment we made on a 5-year basis. I think the 5 years is up. If that commitment if we fulfilled that commitment, possibly we can reduce our appropriation to them if we choose to. You know, I personally support the 4-H program, but I do it out of my pocket, not necessarily out of the county's pocket. So, you know, that's one thing. I'm surprised from the sheriff, the decision to move a special investigative officer from TNT to Road Patrol. And I know it was a personnel issue at the time. It's becomes apparent in this budget. You know, we in our community have a critical drug problem. If we're talking about, you know, doing something about it, fixing that, we need more people in TNT, not less. Or else we need to at least have a discussion about what we're getting from the TNT officers, whether that's the most efficient way for us to deal with the drug problem we have. You know, we have a critical drug problem in our community, and reducing the number of officers that we commit to the drug problem doesn't seem to make any sense in my mind. So, Sheriff Patrol vehicles, you know, whether we buy them in 2017 money, 2018 money, you know, we're looking at $400,000 being proposed to buy patrol vehicles and specialty vehicles. I guess I'd like to know if we've looked at other options than the Chargers. The Chargers are good cars, but they cost us a lot of money.
I would like to note, if I may interrupt, that there is an error in the table that I spoke with the sheriff about earlier this afternoon. We had taken a subtotal from a letter from his department and used that for the vehicle total. So it's 209, I think the number is 341, and it should be 291.
341, 291, we save $50,000, but we're still spending a lot of money. You know, so let's look and see if there's other options. You know, I know that some of the surrounding counties have looked at different vehicles. I recently made a trip to Louisiana, and I seen a lot of police officer vehicles that were not Chargers and Mustangs and those kind of cars. They were
Sonny,
SUVs and different things.
just so I understand, you're looking for a different model, a cheaper model of car?
Possibly,
Yeah.
at least make sure that we've looked at other options, if they meet our needs. They may not meet our needs.
Yeah.
If they don't meet our needs, that's fine, but let's make sure we at least look at it. On the total page, one of the things that was talked about in the highlight was talked about in a couple of different meetings, and it was big in the ticker the other day, was the 4.5% to employees. I'd like to know about how many employees are actually under step 6 of our 500 employees. I think it's about 190, something like that. Yeah, so you know, when we tell the public and through newspaper articles or other that there's the assumption that every county employee got a 4.5% increase, that's truly not true. It's the people with lower seniority that are getting up to speed that are getting the step increases. Many of those step increases were held last year because of the fact that they didn't sign contracts last year. So that's a piece of that. But most of our employees that have been here for a length of time haven't seen any cost of living or pay increases since like 2014. So it's, you know, we need to be careful when we talk about the 4.5% because there's an assumption out there that everybody that works for Grand Traverse County got a 4.5% raise, and that's truly not the case. The pension obligation numbers from one end of this budget to the other, as far as I'm concerned, are terribly inflated. When you look at every line item, every budget center, you see how much we spent on pension obligation for this year. I don't care if we take that number and divide it by 8 and multiply it by 12, we're still only half of what's being recommended to put in the 2018 budget. Those numbers are terribly inflated, in my opinion. MIS charges, well, first and foremost, we made it a IT department probably 10 years ago. We're still listing it in the budget as MIS charges, so you know, somewhere we should retitle that. But MIS charges, IT charges, and indirect costs are being assessed to every budget center throughout this budget at pretty significant dollar amounts with no explanation of how they arrived at those numbers. And some of the numbers are just really strange. They're not even numbers, they're just numbers that, in my mind, when I'm reading it, looks like we pulled them out of a hat.
We do have in order to get to those indirect costs, we do use a cost allocation plan, which is completed by an outside entity based upon information that's given, and we do that in order to comply with a number of our federal and state grants, and so that we can recoup those costs.
Yeah, well, I don't know, nothing in any explanation that I have even comes close to justifying the dollar amounts that are being charged to our departments back on indirect costs and MIS charges. And when you do that, in my mind, you inflate your budget. You know, so maybe, you know, at the end of the day, when we have $2 million or $2.5 million of fund balance left at the end of a year that can go back, we didn't budget properly in the first place. Because if we budgeted our money right, we wouldn't have $2.5 million left at the end of the year. And maybe we could have had money available to do some of the other things that we wanted to do had we not shown that we spent every dime that we had, because the numbers are, at least appear to be wrong. Board of Commissioners Budget Center, you know, I'm not going to go through all of these, just a few here. Health, optical, and dental coverage. The amount spent to date for this year is $8,734.67. Now, if I take that and divide it by 8, multiply it by 12, I don't come anywhere near the $28,000 that's being budgeted.
I don't believe that, so this is an amount that was included to make sure that we had fully accounted for those board members that may participate in our health care plan. I had noted that in the preparation of the budget that nothing had been included for the cost that we may be incurring. So I don't know if it's something that we need to look into for payroll processing, because it would typically post as part of our payroll process. But so there may be a journal entry that needs to be recorded, but because your salaries are now $7 for the year, we're not posting payroll on a bi-weekly basis like we do.
I don't know. This is supposed to be year-to-date expenditures as of September. It says we spent $8,700, and I'm trying to figure out if we spent $8,700 through 9 months or even 8 months of the year, why we're budgeting $28,000.
I have a question related to that. Also, right on that same page, I believe, Does that relate to the fact that there's nothing in there for payment in lieu? Because, for payment in lieu of insurance, because I know several of us will get that.
And in December.
Yes, so it looks like it hasn't been paid this year, and it's not budgeted for next year.
Right.
So could it be that that number is inflated and then there's no, are you assuming?
I don't know.
Assuming
but
that all the, yeah. Are we
It's
assuming that all
showing that the
in-
actual expenditure in 2016 was $28,000. I understand that. But it shows the actual expenditure in 2017 is $8,000, so we're budgeting 28. There has not been the payment in lieu of taxes or health insurance benefit to commissioners. That goes out on the first pay period in December generally to all county employees that qualify, and it was made, but it's not, there's nothing budgeted in the 2018 budget.
So I guess, what, did we budget for all commissioners to have insurance, and that's why that's not there? Or how did that come about?
So I will have to pull up my notes. If you would like me to respond directly at that time to that particular line item for your budget, I'm happy to do so.
We can get it later.
The
Yeah, we
increase in
That's
the,
fine.
I think the idea tonight is to talk about
Yeah.
questions that we have in the documentation, you know, in the paper that we have before us. Under dues for the commissioners, we spent in 2016 $19,500. We've spent so far in 2017 $16,584. The requested amount in the 2018 budget was $18,500, but the approved budgeted, or the budgeted recommendation amount is $35,500. Now, there's an explanation on the next page that talks about what dues we're going to pay, NACO, TTI, NMCA, or other. Amount will need to be increased, increase also to include Networks Northwest for $15,000. Well, I don't know that we've made a commitment to whether or not we're participating in Networks Northwest, but somewhere before we budget an additional $15,000 in the budget, we should make the decision, yes, we are, or no, we're not. Otherwise, we're putting money in another rabbit hole in the budget that we may or may not spend. Under several of the budget centers, there's line items for employee training and development. One of the separation conditions of the agreement that we had with Mr. Menzel was that we would have a defined plan for employee development. Have we seen anything from that? Have we not seen it? I haven't seen it. So, you know, maybe we need to touch base with him. There were 3 projects, I believe, that were assigned to him as a condition of the separation agreement that was signed.
There may have been 4.
I think 3, but maybe 4. Anyway, around it, we are now at the 1st of November. The contract required that we pay him 3 months. We agreed to pay him 4 months as a condition of the separation agreement, but it set stipulations of items that he was supposed to complete and provide to us, none of which, at least I have seen, so I'd like to follow up on that someplace along the way.
Madam Chair, I can provide an update on that if you'd like. On 2 of the projects, the MSU Extension, the Citizen Engagement course is going on. It's being held on Mondays and Wednesdays. And so that is going on. And then the education piece, Mr. Menzel has been working with Bill Hendry on that from our HR department. So I know that has been ongoing.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Just following up. Many of these are the same. MIS revenues under family court, and the court's budgets are a completely different thing to try to read anyway, just because either I don't understand them or they have a lot of different items in there. But we charges for services rendered in revenue, so far to date through September is $286,000 in family court. But we're projecting and recommending a $515,000 revenue for them in the 2018 budget. Well, that's another $220,000 we may get. We don't have it going forward so far, you know, take the 286, divide it by 8, multiply it by 12, maybe it comes to the 515. But when I'm reading it, I'm seeing there, we budgeted a bunch of money. Brownfield self-funded. The one, and
Oh, do you have an answer for us?
Yeah, I feel
Thank you.
like there's certain things that would be a disservice to the public if I didn't correct. So for instance, with revenues, they're slightly more difficult to project for year end than expenditures because whereas, for instance, personnel, it's a biweekly process. It occurs 26 times a year. With revenues, especially when they're state revenues, there's often a difference in timing, whether they're paid bi-week or bi-monthly, quarterly, whether at year end we have to book a receivable because, for instance, we won't receive the payment until February. So there are year end adjustments that have to be recorded. So with revenues in particular, it's a little bit more difficult to apply that same process.
Right. Well, and it's just when I see, you know, a $200,000 difference, it's like, wait a minute, where's the money at? You know, in a finance department, we had in 2016, we had $2,500 in personal leave. We budgeted $5,000 in the 2017 budget. We haven't expended any, but we are recommending $8,483 in the 2018 budget. That's, even if I took the, you know, the idea there, what I've seen in these notes in many places is we were going to look at the actual expenditures for 2016 or the projected expenditures of 2017. We're going to use the number that's larger. Well, I got $2,500 in 2016. I have zero in 2017, but I'm projecting a recommended budget of $8,483. So,
Do we have an answer?
Again, the methodology of divide by 8 and multiply by 12 was applied to operating line items, but not to revenue or to personnel line items. Personnel line items, again, happen on a biweekly basis. So at the time of this budget preparation, the activity reported was 19 pay periods out of 26. As you had noted, similarly to payment in lieu of health insurance, which is paid annually, so also is PTO. For the 2017 budget, we had, and I don't have this right in front of me, I know that we had a number of vacancies. And also, I have several new staff members in my department. I have 2 new staff members in my department in the STEP program. So one in PTO, you'll see that across all departments, there will be a 0. With our projected revenues, we anticipated that they would be fully paid out to be conservative in our projections, but those will occur later this year as a one-time payment, and they also take into consideration the increase in steps from current year wages.
okay. I do appreciate in almost all of the budget centers, one of the things that I've always complained about is the postage numbers. People don't put letters in mailboxes and mail them anymore. So, you know, in most of the budget centers, that number has went down significantly. Under the building authority, does anyone know, and you probably should, but I don't, how much longer do we have to pay off the Woodmere building? I don't have to have the answer tonight, but it jumped out real big that, you know, we're making an appropriation of $250,000 a year toward the Woodmill building debt. I'd like to know how close that building is to paid off, because it wasn't a great building when we bought it. We didn't spend a ton of money remodeling it.
Is that the law enforcement center?
Yes.
That's it.
It's still not a great building. I'm pretty sure that the sheriff and I agree on
We're going to
that.
want to sell it, don't talk about it.
But the point is that we're budgeting $250,000 a year. I'm just curious how close we are to having that paid off.
We'll find that out.
Yeah, that's fine. The work release facility. We remodeled the work release facility. We made it available to ATS to run transition housing out of. We're looking at a pretty sizable expenditure relatively for utilities and repair and maintenance on that building. Are we deriving any income from that? Is ATS paying or providing us discounted rates on the people that are housed in that facility?
I can speak to the rent that they pay, and I believe that it was a board-approved agreement a number of years ago, and we receive $1 per year for that facility. This also speaks to one of the other issues that we have at the county is we have a number of agreements that have not been reviewed in a number of years that were negotiated not to the benefit of the county or even to an equitable share of costs or the receipt of revenues. And so that is something that's listed actually in the transmittal memo and is something that we believe that we need to look at.
Okay. You know, there's lots more. I guess the last one that I want to point out is what I believe is a really tough piece is the way the unfunded liabilities are posted into the budget. You know, I've talked about that a little bit before. I just happened to open to the little stick-it note that talks about the corrections division. Defined benefit unfunded liability in 2016 was $584,000. The actual expenditure in 2017 is $449,000, and we're budgeting $741,000. There are some of these line items through here where the unfunded liability is greater than double the amount that we've paid out in 2017. The problem, you know, and all of you have heard me bitch about it before, so it's not anything new. When we put the unfunded liability into these budgets like this, it skews all of our numbers. When I look at what it costs to operate the jail for a day, and I've got $750,000 of pension liability into the cost of operating the jail, it skews all of my numbers. You know, if I look at this number, there's no reason we should put anybody in the Grand Traverse County Jail. We should mothball it and contract people in Leelanau County because we can do that for $30 a day. And if I did the math right, if I take the total thing here, we're spending about $97 a day per prisoner to house in the Grand Traverse County Jail based on average population and total costs. You know, well, we know that that's not right, but that's what the numbers show us. So we need to find a better way to deal with the pension obligation. You know, and I've heard all kinds of reasons of why we put it in the budget centers the way they are, but I think it skews all of the budgets. It makes the budget look terribly inflated because, you know, we know that even if you took the 449 and you divide it by 8 and you multiply it by 12, it doesn't come to this kind of number.
You look like you want to respond.
Well, with respect to the pension and the method at which we allocate, if decisions were truly being made upon it costs us X dollars to operate the jail or Y dollars to outsource, then we should be paid Y dollars, then that would be a concern. The way that it's being allocated is such that it is being fairly and equitably distributed across all of the cost centers such that we can recover those costs through grants. I think that the response you've received has probably been consistent over the years in that regard. And that's especially important, for instance, with Friend of the Court, because Friend of the Court under the Circuit Court Association has one, the ability to recover 2/3 of its expenditures through a federal grant program, which really drives the method of allocating the cost. And two, it also has the majority of the remaining active members in our defined benefit plan. So when we're looking at, you know, the ongoing cost of that liability, that is absolutely where we would want to seek recovering that benefit. When it comes to like the display of how we simply display the unfunded pension liability, it's not going to change the $5.9 million number that we have to pay to MERS per the extension agreement, and it's not going to change ultimately the weight of that the general fund bears. So whether it's in the departments, which they, you know, bear the weight then proportionately, or it's in its own separate department within the general fund, we would still be having to pay that same amount annually.
But we lose the ability to recoup.
Yeah, but that ability only applies to very, very few accounts within our organization, and I think it does more damage to us than it does good for that. One other piece, I got a lot more, but one that, the Meyer House, we are required by law to pay property taxes to Garfield Township on that piece of property because we rent it. So there is no money budgeted in the 2018 budget to pay property taxes for that property. It was budgeted, and we didn't pay them in 2016, but I don't believe that the house was rented in 2016. And there hasn't been any tax payment made in 2017. But I know because Long Lake Township, that I'm very familiar with, also has some duplex property that we rent adjacent to the township park. That property had to be put back on the tax roll and has to pay property taxes. So the Meyer House will have to be paid taxes on. And I would hope that Garfield Township already knew that before I just told them on TV, We have paid it.
Oh.
Okay, so it's not showing in this report, but
Maybe
it has been paid. Thanks, Sherry.
Anything else?
Yeah, basically what I've seen repeatedly throughout this budget is, what I think are inflated numbers, particularly the way the unfunded liabilities were posted to the budget. Other than that, there's a little line item here or there, but we don't pass this budget based on a line item by line item anyway. We pass it as a fund balance or a fund budget for each of our departments. And, fortunately, we've always historically been very good. Our departments do a good job of managing their budgets. So I have all the faith in the world of our employees. I think the budget is inflated, and thereby we may have some money available to do some of the other things we want to do if we fix some of the numbers.
Who's next?
Did I put you all to sleep?
No.
Not yet.
We just want to make sure you were done.
I'm just picturing the sheriff's department in Yugos.
I actually talked to some scouts on Monday night about county government, and I explained that a lot of it is public safety. And he said, well, why don't the officers just have one of those little sirens and that they can just put in their own car? And I said, that's a thought. So he's trying to come up with ideas. You want to go next?
Well, I'd like to know, if before this budget gets approved, whether we're going to have a chance to discuss animal control. Obviously not tonight, but
You can discuss it whenever you like.
The public would like to know, and we don't have any increases in the budget for animal control that I see. Another one that I'd like is on IT. I'd like to know, because this is just a small portion of all the changes that were proposed, how maybe over 2 or 3 years that looks. And what I'd be coming to after this budget is done is that I'd like to see a 3-year rolling budget so that we don't just plan 1 year at a time, because most of it actually does just keep reoccurring. I'm glad to hear that finance has got a couple new employees. I didn't know that. So are you fully staffed now in the finance department?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. It'd be nice to know which other departments currently aren't fully staffed. I thought I'd asked recently about whether the sheriff's department was fully staffed, and I heard that it was, but I'm not sure that the jail is actually fully staffed. So I'd like to know.
I think Captain Ritter says no.
Not at this time? Yeah, that's what I thought. So when the gentleman spoke earlier during public comment, some of the things that might not be happening are because jail staff can't have somebody come in to offer some assistance to a prisoner because that jail staff is working on the regular jail duties. So it does really make a difference as to what people can come in to offer help at the jail. And it would be nice to know, especially a perspective of 30 years the gentleman has. What's changed, back and forth over 30 years, that'd be nice to know. And I didn't see it, but I'm sure it's here somewhere, how we're going to, save money to replace some of the things that we have, like the jail. How we're saving towards that, so that we don't just have any surprises. Again, that goes well with a longer-term budget, that we can see these things at a glance, how we're planning in advance. It was nice that we replaced our county administrator, but it also did sort of hold up our budget process. I don't know where we would be if we didn't have a new county administrator coming in September, but there was a chart provided by the MSU Extension Service that I think showed the budget planning process starting as early as May. So I don't know if we're actually on time or behind at this point, but we're on time according to our schedule that we have now. I understand that part. I just don't think we're starting early enough necessarily by what a academic model would be for the budget process.
Excuse me. We do plan on starting earlier next year and have the 3-year rolling budget plan in mind, for sure. But I think we're 2 months ahead than last year. I think last year you
It's like the past 2 years.
Yes.
It was very late.
Yeah.
Very late.
I feel accomplished in having
Well, that's
arrived
good,
7 weeks
because,
ago.
We're moving in the right direction.
Just being late shouldn't be normal, so.
No, it shouldn't.
Yeah.
Agreed.
You done?
Cheryl's turn.
Okay, a couple of things that I'm not expecting an answer tonight, so, maybe for the next one. I thought I had asked this, but I'll ask it again. I'm wondering what sort of savings we would realize by increasing the deductible amounts for the insurance, because the deductible amounts do seem on the generous side, and I know that there's been some effort to get that, but it hasn't been provided to us, so it doesn't have to be tonight.
Want to
but if-
respond at all?
I think Bill might be able to respond
I could
even.
respond generally, and I know that Bill also has a specific example, but that is something that we explored. We explored a good number of scenarios, but ultimately, budget note that I got off of. Ultimately, as Commissioner Wheelock had noted, our experience rate and our demographic data is really what drives our annual cost of insurance. And so with the experience rate and the demographic data that we have, that's ultimately now what insurance companies use in their underwriting. And so for them, it doesn't matter if our deductible is $500 or $3,000 if they're taking on the risk of a $75,000 claim. And ultimately, of the various scenarios that we reviewed, there wasn't a great enough cost savings to the county to increase the risk or the cost to the employee at this time without taking steps first to see what kind of education we can do, what we can negotiate into contracts, and how over a multi-year process we can really get to where we need to be. But if, Bill, you wanted to provide maybe that.
I don't need any more than that.
Oh, okay.
Again, I said I had asked this question a while ago and I never got the answer, so I appreciate it tonight to have gotten the answer. I would also suggest that we should reinstitute the employee wellness plan that we had in place prior to the last couple of years, where, we're trying to help our employees work towards a healthy lifestyle, et cetera. I'm wondering what sort of savings we would realize by increasing the payment in lieu on health insurance. I believe that it currently costs $11,000 or $12,000 per person to be insured, and you offer $2,000 in lieu of that. If you were to offer more than $2,000, would there be more people who would be willing to take that option? Let's say you offered $5,000. If 10 people chose that, we just, that's $50,000. I mean, you can do the math. Jody can do the math. Multiply times 8, divide by 12, whatever you want to do. The point is, at the end of the day, it's going to be a whole lot cheaper than paying for insurance. And people are going to, it's human nature, you're going to take the insurance. rather than the $2,000, because why not, you know?
Well, they have to be able to prove that they do have other coverage available
Understood.
to opt out.
But they might opt out to other
But my point
insurance.
is that you're
There
going to
are a
be
number of employees who have spouses. who have health
Incentivize them
insurance.
more.
Incentivize it, absolutely. I mean,
Understood.
20 years ago, you know, this was the payout in certain places, so I think it's worth looking at.
I agree.
My understanding is that our required OPEB payment is about $65,000, is that correct?
No. It's, I believe, 665,000 was for 2017.
So you've only budgeted $250,000 of our required OPEB payment?
300,000.
300,000.
So the OPEB payment is, unlike the pension payment, which is required, the OPEB payment is not currently required. So this will be the third year in a row that we've set something aside, but we're working towards fully funding that actuarial contribution.
Are we currently pay-as-you-go?
Yes, we have been pay-as-you-go until 2016.
Okay, so my point was that we're not required to pay $250,000 or $300,000. We're not required to pay $50,000.
Well, our actual expenditures each year, it would, and I'd have to look
My
up
question is required payment. How much are we required to pay?
the actual expenditures.
Okay, and so how much is that last year?
She'll come back to us with it.
Will have to come back to you, otherwise I would be
Okay.
just ballpark.
But was it more
It's
than
nowhere near
$300,000?
No.
Was it close to $300,000?
No.
Was it close to 200?
No?
Was it close to 100?
Okay, so I do not want to be held to this number, but approximately
We'll call it an estimate.
80,000
Okay.
would,
And that's my point. My point is that we have a very tight budget. We're not required to make these payments. I'm still holding out a hope that OPEB's going to disappear with the stroke of a governor's pen someday, like it's done at the state level. And so if we have a tight budget and we want to find money, we don't have to pay $300,000 to OPEB. That's my point. And do with it what you will, but I wanted to make that point. I noticed in the packet, we have huge coffee.
Do you need some coffee?
I need some coffee. We have huge copy machine charges. I mean, the amount of fees for copying would choke a horse. I want to know, what have we looked at as far as that? Because that's a very, very large number. I mean, do we need to buy more machines? Do we need to contract it out? What can we do? Because it's a big number. And I'm not expecting an answer tonight, but I would be interested in that.
We definitely will analyze that as part of the centralized purchasing. That's one of the large ticket items that would be a
Super.
focal point.
Good. I see that there's a $25,000 placeholder for master planning, $25,000. When was the last master planning done, and where is it? Where is the last master plan?
The master plan for parks or master
It
plan
was in
for
the
just
planning
the...
department.
It's for the
Boy, is
grand
John
plan.
Syke here?
No.
I don't think so.
No,
I
but
saw
my-
him later.
Yeah.
Does
I don't know.
anybody know when the last master plan was done? Does anybody know where the last master plan is?
It's in the,
I'm sure
there's one in the
there's a
in the
copy somewhere.
conference
There's probably a
room
box, in a box
upstairs.
somewhere. Okay,
It's on
my
a shelf.
point is, do we need a master plan right now, and do we need to spend the $25,000?
it was 2,500.
In planning? No, it was more than that.
Am I not
No, it
seeing the
wasn't.
right
It was
line?
$25,000.
Yeah, I think it was
Anyway,
25,000.
it's a small number compared to some of the other numbers. A concern that I saw repeated again and again and again in each of the budget centers was a line item called contract services. And just about every single budget center has a line item for contract services. And I think it's interesting that the one I'm staring at right now is for the finance department. And Jody just advised us that the finance department is fully staffed, and yet they have a $23,350 recommended line item for contract services. And I can't
Actually,
imagine.
I have an answer, sorry. I wondered that myself. Those are actually subtotals, I believe.
So,
No, it's subtotals of what?
I think they are.
I see contract services. In 2016, they spent $33,000. In 2017 to
audits?
date, they've spent almost $24,000, and they're suggesting that for 2018, they need another almost $23,000.
Sounds like it might be audit, but I'll let Jody speak to that.
so the audit I do know is budgeted, not in the finance department's budget. I'm having trouble as quickly as you're speaking, flipping back and forth between pages. It is important to note that for contractual services, there are subtotals for each of the various categories of expenditures. That's one of the things that has come up a number of times in our departmental meetings. People would say, I'm not spending this much in commodities. Well, it's a subtotal, so I'll have to flip to finance to find that. With respect to your first question about the master plan, it looks like $9,500 was initially requested, but it was removed from the recommended budget. That was under tab 20. And knowing that finance would be fully scrutinized, I would be surprised if I don't have an answer for the 2335, but I would have to pull it up on my laptop.
I'm looking at the colloquy that you've included under the planning and development budget, where it says, contract services will be needed to update the county master plan, okay? And it says, we are expecting it to be around $20,000 to $25,000, okay? These funds will be leveraged as staff will be seeking grants to support the master plan update. You need $20,000 to $25,000. That's what it says in the colloquy. Is that not accurate?
That was, so unless it says 18 REC, it was a departmental note, so it was a note that would have been placed there by a department head. That's across all of the various line item budgets. But $20,000 to $25,000 was not included in the recommended budget. So that's something that if it were to proceed, would have to be requested separately.
Okay, and so, you know, I've got tabs marked in multiple places, and I really don't want to bore people or myself with going through all of them to highlight all of the areas where there is a line item that says contract services. I'll be happy to provide them to you so that you can respond to them the next time we meet. But they add up to a lot of money. And my concern is that, you know, in looking at last year's budget and in looking at the last year, I've found literally hundreds of thousands of dollars that were spent for contract services that were not part of the budget. So this is what concerns me, okay? And I'm happy to, you know, provide that information to my fellow commissioners so that they can see. I do have pages that I can reference for you of the line items that support these numbers. But, I mean, the numbers total literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they were not budgeted. They were not budgeted. They were not part of the 2017 budget. And so how did we find the money to pay all of this? And my concern is that we found it by having these pools of money within the budget for things like contract services. And I don't want you to respond tonight, because I know you want to look at these numbers, and I'll get you a copy of what I've given everyone else. But it's concerning, and I guess it just kind of flows into what Sonny said, that the budget feels inflated, the budget feels like it's got a lot of wiggle room in it. And what concerns me is that where I would like it to wiggle is in the direction of giving a cost of living raise to people who haven't gotten one for 3 years. I don't know what that number is, and I'm sure you could calculate it, and maybe you will for our next study session. But non-union employees and people who are not on a STEP plan haven't received a cost of living raise for 3 years. In the meantime, in that 3 years, minimum wages around here have gone from about $7.50 an hour to about $13 an hour. You can get a job at Costco today for $13 an hour. How are we going to keep our people? How are we going to keep them motivated? How are we going to honor their work when we can't even give them a cost of living raise, and not in 3 years? And these are not elected people who knew what they were going to get when they ran for the job. These are career people. This is their life. This is what they're doing for our community. And we have got to find a way to make this budget work so that we can do that. And my last plea is for animal control. And I just want to say that I know animal control is not a mandated service. I'm well aware of that. But I have heard consistently from the public, since I've been sitting in this seat, that they want us to protect the vulnerable members of our community, and that animals are part of that. They're vulnerable members.
Woof.
Parks, that's right. Parks and Rec is not a mandated service either, and we're budgeting them hundreds of thousands of dollars. We don't need hundreds of thousands of dollars. We probably need another 100,000, maybe 150, okay? To get animal control funded with a couple of officers, to get them into the sheriff's department, because I know that the sheriff will welcome them with open arms, because he's going to help us with this. And then we can look at, maybe down the road, we can look at doing a millage for animal control if the community says that that's what they'd like us to do. But right now, they need that general fund support, and I think it's up to us to find that money to do that. So that's all I have for tonight.
Okay, thank you. Bob, your turn.
Well, it sounds like we're going to greatly inflate our budget from where we're at now with all the other stuff, so, I mean, I personally don't support increasing animal control, but you know that already, so, no, I don't have a whole lot, really, still looking at it. Sonny talked a lot. You talked a lot.
You're welcome to talk a lot, Bob.
I don't have a lot.
I'd love to hear everything you have to say, Bob.
I don't have much to say
Oh,
tonight,
okay.
so
All right.
that's about it.
Okay, we concede to Dan then. Your turn.
Well, I came here basically to listen,
Okay.
and a lot of you have done great homework. Sonny, as usual, has done his great job. I'm going to look at this and be directing some questions to Vicki, and I know this isn't easy. We don't have a lot of money, and we have a lot of things to spend money on. So it's a tough job.
That's it? Okay. My turn. I will say that I like the way the budget is presented, because there's lots of notes, and I have not had the opportunity to know this much about the budget in the 3 years that I've been here. So I like all the notes. I like to know what was asked for and why it wasn't, how things negotiated out to what it came out to. I like that. Just to know. Just not to pick at it, but just so that I know, because people ask, why is this and why is that and why didn't they get this, and it's good to know. I had one question, and it has to do with the clerk's office, county clerk. There was something that you asked for machine coding, election machine coding, and I couldn't figure out if we did it with this budget or it's budgeted as if we didn't do that. I couldn't figure that out.
We got a grant for over $100,000 for software
Okay.
that we can do our own coding. Right now, the townships all pay for coding from another source. We could do it in-house and increase our revenue, and that's what we want to do.
Okay.
But as far as going, we didn't get all we wanted. We didn't.
So that's not in the budget to do the coding
Well,
in-house?
to be honest, I wanted an employee to do it and increase all her work.
Communicate with her
But
that the classification was included?
no, I heard it. I didn't get
See, that's why I
any.
couldn't figure out if the reclassification for that person in-house to do that coding was included or not.
Well, then, we
Would you like to
have
retract
the
anything
potential
that you
to
just
make
said?
money.
Thank you. Okay.
And, because I'm always looking at ways to make revenue, this is a way to keep control of the elections with us. We were very fortunate to get this grant from the state, and then we will charge the townships to do their coding, and we will get the money instead of the vendors. And they are actually encouraging us to do it. They're going to train us to do it. So That's what that is.
Okay.
The reason there's not as much next year as potential for the following years is because the company that we chose for the election equipment is going to do it free for us for the May and August election, just as part of the whole getting us our new equipment. So that's free to the townships. That saves them some money, and we'll only charge them in November then next year.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I had a couple others.
If I could, since the clerk was just speaking about her budget, I think that one of the questions that may arise in your review of the departments, especially when looking across the departmental summary in the main transmittal document, is that there is a substantial increase from 17, and that's because it is an election year. So every other year, there's a substantial increase.
If the CPL program goes away, do we have a savings in your department? We're going to lose revenue.
We would lose quite a bit of revenue, and I actually have a fund balance right now that I can't really touch for anything, except, so I talked to our finance director, and we are putting some of that cost, or some of that revenue into wages to try to not have such a fund balance carrying over every year. So we talked about what would be the best percentage. If it goes away, I lose quite a bit of revenue.
Well, I had no problem reading where the revenue was for the CPL. I had trouble trying to figure out where the expenditures against that revenue were. So obviously, if the revenue, if CPL goes away, then the revenue goes away. But will there be a savings? Will we have an overabundance of staff? I'm pretty
We
sure
won't really
she's
have an
gonna say no,
overabundance of
but-
staff. I've only got about 30% of one person's wages attributed to the CPL.
CPL.
Although everybody works it.
Yeah, I just couldn't
Yeah.
track where the expenditure was coming out to
Well,
offset
and
that
what doesn't
revenue.
show in there, and I don't know where it shows, is my fund balance.
It's in there.
Does it show in there now?
So I apologize that the summary document isn't numbered, but within the fund summaries, I believe it's
263.
263. So Fund 263, which you can kind of locate at the top. Oh, I just happened to turn right to it. So you can locate at the top, Fund 263, concealed pistol licensing. In each of these fund summaries, I've also included the fund balances. So for 2017, they began the year with $43,000. With the adopted 2017 budget, they'll actually contribute approximately $4,000. So they're projecting to end the year with $47,000 in fund balance. And then the 18 recommended budget contributes, again, an additional $6,500.
They're very specific on what we can spend our money on, unfortunately, with that 263 fund. I'm kind of limited, just like the Register of Deeds Technology Fund. That's why we were looking at ways to push it into maybe some wages or something. I have to justify that it's CPL related, so.
Did you have a question, Bob?
Yeah, what's our general fund balance, and what's it going to be projected at? And, are we going to be over that? I can't remember the percentage we want, like, to keep in there. Are we going to be over that where we have some, some funds to use?
So again, in the summary transmittal document, so I'm referring now to the general fund summary by department. There is fund balance information shown with the adoption of the 2017 budget. The board also adopted an updated fund balance policy that spoke to the GASB required classifications of fund balance. So the unrestricted fund balance projected for year end will be in excess of the 15% by approximately the same amount of the projected year end surplus. So basically, whatever we end up having at the end of the year that isn't redirected to other 2018 requests that are pulled forward will be in excess of that 15%.
What's the number? I think he was looking for dollars.
I didn't include that.
Okay, we'll wait for that. I had a couple
It's
other things.
approximately 5.6 million, or off the top of my head. The exact dollar I can't provide, but 5.6 million would be the 15%.
I'd like to, would you help me understand that question? I think I'm wondering the same thing. We're required to have so much fund balance. But we're going to use some of it to balance the budget?
No, we're
No, we're
not.
No, we're not.
No.
We're going to have
We're
more
gonna
than
add
we're-
some at the end of
We're going to have
15.
more than we're required to have.
Our fund balance requires us to have a 15% fund balance.
Okay.
But what if I understand the discussion tonight, is we're projecting that about $5.6 million of the 2017 budget is not going to be spent.
Oh,
No,
That's not what she said.
No, you said
no.
5.6.
So you can see why I'm confused.
5.6 is the 15%
Oh,
total,
5.6 is
Yes.
the total.
Yes.
Okay.
and we may add to it at the end of 17. Is there an estimate as to how much we'll add to that 5.6 at all?
So, based on the year-end projections, $2 million is shown here. That would be reduced by any positions, because a large part of that is assumed to be from funded vacant personnel. The total year-end projection would be decreased if some of those positions had been filled in the interim period. But the high point would be $2 million.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What's the rationale for having a budget full of unfunded, unfulfilled positions?
So in the budget cycle, right, so we're sitting here today in October, and there may be positions that are currently vacant that we fill before year end. We need to make sure that they're included, otherwise we'd be laying off
Well, I
the
get
new
that
hire.
theory, but if they're included in this year's budget and they come in October, they're only going to come in at a minuscule fraction of what's been budgeted for the year for that position.
Yes. So one of the things that we've gone back and forth on is how to account for that lapse, and whether or not it would be prudent to include some sort of allowance for that personnel lapse in the budgeting process, especially with the historical data supporting that we historically have such savings at year end.
Meaning a reduction in that, take some percentage.
Yes.
I've wondered that because every year we have this like $300,000 that we didn't spend, but we never count on it. Is there some reason we don't?
We never get it back, do we?
Yeah. And we never
Can't really
count on it.
count on it because you don't know if someone's going to leave and how many months it's going to
We
go.
have this money, and yet we don't have any money supposedly.
It's back to
Just
the idea that we, as far as I'm concerned, the budget is inflated, the total numbers are inflated, because there's money in there that we know damn well we're not going to use. So if we had real numbers, we can figure out, possibly we could provide other services.
Yeah.
You know, the sheriff and I did talk to recently about the fact that I would much rather budget him gas amounts to X number of dollars and have him have to come to me at the end of October and say, hey, the price of gas is up, we're going to need another $5,000 to get through the end of the year. I would rather do that than have $10,000 extra left in his gas line item budget that he doesn't spend.
But there's no legal reason. For some reason, I thought when you had positions that were not filled, that we had to legally,
No,
we don't.
you can eliminate them the next year and not fill them.
We don't have to have that in the budget.
We're going to be, we're only going to spend 95 to
Why don't we eliminate
97%
No
of our
kidding.
personnel.
I think they have eliminated some.
We have some money for sheriff's
Some of the positions.
department, and we have some.
I think that they went through that and eliminated some.
Well, I guess for me, my thought is, you know, if you don't need those positions, then either cut them or reassign them. I guess I don't want to budget, because I know in years past, they budgeted based on the fact that, well, we know a certain percentage isn't going to be filled. You know, to me, if you're going to budget you budget for full employment, and maybe I'm the only one that feels that way, but to me, I would think you budget for full employment. At the end of the year, if you don't, then find something to do with that, you know.
But we're not given that option, and therein lies the rub. The rub is that we've gone a year without filling all these positions, and yet we're still being told we don't have money to do all of these things that we're saying we feel we would like to do.
Because, I mean, you could build the case to say, look, you know, say, and just throw a number, say we're 10 people short or whatever, and I don't know number, I'm just throwing them. But if historically we're 10 personnel short, I don't think we're providing any less service in any other areas. So could you reassign it, you know, and come up with some statistical number? I know they're waiting to say something.
Something we all are.
Let's go.
Bated breath.
I'm just rambling now at this point, so.
So one of the ways that we got to the 18 balanced budget was taking into consideration the savings we'll have in 17 from these vacant positions and accomplishing these one-time capital acquisitions or projects. But 2 would be either a method of going forward, setting a policy such that the savings from vacant personnel positions is taken into consideration either in the budgeting process or by policy is designated towards some source. So for instance, lapse in personnel at year end will be reviewed for contribution to the unfunded pension liability.
Or CIP,
Or raises for
or
employees.
raises, that's right. But there was, on page 9 of the transmittal letter, it explains the various things where we're spending 2017 money to pull ahead 2018 request, and that accounted for, what is the total? I know it's under $1 million, but what would you have a number of what the
Is that
total is?
600 or 900,000?
It's close to $1 million, I want to say.
Just shy of $1 million.
And then we also did remove 5 positions, and I think that's on page 5 of the transmittal, or page 2, where we eliminated an equalization appraiser, facilities .5 FTE, a facilities building maintenance worker, MSU co-op .1, and a planning office specialist. So we did eliminate and therefore defund those positions.
Did we modify the county staffing plan when we eliminated those positions? Because there's 2 different pieces of this. There's the funding of the positions, but then we have a staffing plan also.
So upon your adoption of the budget, then those positions would be removed from the county staffing plan?
That's right. All of this is recommended at this point.
I had a couple other things. As Sunny noted, everywhere in the budget, there is charges from the IT department to the other departments, but there's no IT budget as to where that money goes. So, because I know it's like facilities charges some things, and then there's a facilities budget that says where that money goes. And I didn't find an IT budget.
Yeah, so the board packet, the IT department is an internal service fund, similar to a fringe benefits fund,
Okay.
because it services all of the departments. So that's not included as a special revenue fund, as a
Okay.
different type of operating department, but we would be happy to provide additional information about the IT department.
Okay, thank you. And
I
also,
want to know where they spend their money.
right, and also,
Where they
Cheryl,
spend
in
it.
response to your question about employee wellness, I happen to know that MSU Extension has an employee wellness plan that they plan to present at some point that is actually at no cost to the county. So that will be an extra benefit that we would get from MSU Extension for our investment in that program. Yes. Dan?
I'm going to ask a stupid question.
Okay, we're ready.
I was under the impression, like with the staffing plan, that you had some obligation to the union to keep certain positions open. Is that true or no?
I don't know that that's part
I
of
would
any
think probably certain
contract.
departments may be required to be staffed. I don't know if that's in the, I don't think it's, I haven't seen that in any contracts, but I would think you're probably required
The
to
only
keep
place
know, I
that I
was-
can ever remember that applied was when we had full-time lifeguards at the pool. They were union employees, and they were entitled, Chris can probably clarify if I forget, but we were required to maintain those 2 positions
Okay.
100% of the time. We couldn't eliminate those 2 full-time lifeguards and put part-time people in their place. They were guaranteed first. But as far as I know, that was a Teamsters contract that specifically addressed the lifeguards at the pool. And as far as I recall, that's the only time that ever came up.
Okay, so we can
Maybe-
eliminate
maybe-
Right,
positions.
well, a
Bonnie
few
has
years
better.
ago, every department head can determine how many staff they actually need. And I actually eliminated a position when I merged. Do you remember when I merged two offices together? I was able to eliminate one whole position just because, and I did it she was retiring. I didn't like fire somebody, but I didn't need that many staff. And most department heads know the total number of staff they need. I don't think the union would have much to say. I mean, you can't have
Okay.
more people than you need.
I just remember that thing, and I thought, I didn't know if it applied across the board.
It applied with those full-time or Teamsters lifeguards is the only time I ever remember that it applied.
Okay, thank you, Sonny.
Okay. Anything else? Yes, Tom?
Oh, well, the other side of being understaffed is overtime. So I don't know if we have overtime problems in any departments. I know one of the city departments is notorious for having a lot of overtime. But incentives for employees and retirees to save the county money, like the, to be able to pass on not taking the health insurance and receiving an amount of money that's more reflective of
Like an
some.
HSA or something?
Yeah, that's what you said. I mean, it's not in keeping with the price of insurance. And to buy back retirees' health plans, if there's, that's an incentive in a way to give them cash them out, and save the county money. I've asked that more than once. But, ultimately, we have no control over health care, and this country has to address that issue eventually. You need to contact your congressman and tell them that you cannot afford to live and be able to afford health care and all the other things you need if the health care costs are going to increase by the amounts that they do every year. It doesn't work, and we have to change. And single-payer universal health care is one answer to that. And maybe it could start with government, because government can't afford to run. Something's got to give. Health care would be an area where we could all advocate to change the system, so that when doctors graduate from MSU and go to intern at Munson, that they have a different perspective on what their future is, and yet they can still have a very nice living. But we have to control those costs. We can't go on like this. It won't work. It just won't work.
You're not suggesting that doctors make less money, are you?
Never.
Of course not. Okay.
Just kidding.
So I would encourage the commissioners, if you have specific questions, maybe pose them, and they'll get the
We'll come back with
answers.
responses.
Yes.
Vicki's got a whole pages of notes. that
Pages
she had
I have.
earlier.
And November 1st is not
Sunny,
going
but I
to work,
appreciate it.
right?
Thank you, Sonny.
Well, let's talk about November 1st.
Yeah, we
That, it's been suggested that we have another budget study session at 4 o'clock that day, but I happen to know that the agenda on November 1st, I think, is going to be pretty long. So I don't know if we
How
wanted
about
to.
the week after that?
Yeah.
I
To the
won't be
8th?
here on the 8th.
You won't be here on the 8th?
I mean, you can still have it.
Jody's not here on the 8th.
I won't be here on
So we
the 8th.
kind of need a finance director here at that time.
Yeah.
I have to go downstate.
I mean, we can,
Well, who would
Try
be
to-
here on the 1st?
everybody will be here on the 1st, well, Ron.
Well,
I thought you said that there was a...
there was Veterans ad
We
hoc.
can change
move
the ad
that.
hoc, that's not a
But
problem.
I guess, because you
We-
said the agenda's
we
full,
can-
but this is going to be a special meeting before the meeting.
Yeah, and it was
so
just going to make it kind of long, but we can work on the agenda and.
I'd rather have a long one than.
Okay.
And
Then
get
another day.
I mean, like Tom's kind of
That's
saying, let's
fine.
get this going.
That's fine, if
And
that's
you
okay
said
with
Ron will
everybody.
not be here on the 1st?
No. His next meeting will be the 15th of November.
You'll be here on the 15th?
That's what I understand.
Deer season.
Well, that's the information I have. So,
I'm already hosed that week anyway.
So, we'll go ahead then with
So
the
next
November 1st at
Wednesday?
4 o'clock. Okay, we'll go ahead with that. Okay? And then we'll move on from there.
Sure.
Okay?
As long as you
So,
promise to build breaks in.
I promise, we will get you breaks. Don't worry.
Mercy.
Don't worry.
Either that or a box of Depends.
I already got that on.
All right, we're done. So, we will move on.
Nice job on these. A
Thank
Yes.
you.
lot of work.
We will
Yes,
get back to you
thank you.
with
Thank you
responses
very
to your
much.
questions.
Yes,
as
thank
well.
you.
Really helpful.
Second
Yes.
public comment?
Well, we had, yes, this is our chance for second public comment. If anybody has anything else to say? Once, twice? Okay. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
I I don't know. I'll have to